Hello and welcome to Drive and Double Feature Podcast. I'm Nathan.
I'm Ryan.
And this is the podcast where we talk about 2 movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. But before we get into today's movie, we have a Patreon. If you head over to patreon.com/driveindoublefeaturepodcast, just for $5 a month, you can help support the show. And you get bonus episodes where we do fun things like BuzzFeed quizzes and we review modern movies over there. But getting into today's episode, we are back again, another Bondzilla week. We're back into Bondzilla week, so we have a James Bond movie for you this Tuesday, and we're moving into You Only Live Twice, and I take a nice breath of fresh air whenever I get to watch an actual James Bond movie after seeing Casino Royale.
I was so shocked not to see Woody Allen in this one.
Yeah, no Woody Allen, no John Huston. I was just really surprised when they replaced Peter Sellers with
going back to Sean Connery. I'm like, I wish they would have just kept David Niven.
Yeah, David Niven just had all the charm in the world that Sean Connery doesn't have. But no, it really is nice to just watch another James Bond movie, and this is actually Sean Connery's, in quotations, last Bond movie. He would return after being gone for one movie, but this was known before the movie came out. This was going to be the last Bond movie with Sean Connery in it. So it's kind of a big deal. So there's a lot of similarities with the Godzilla and Bond movie this week. So we both have 1967 movies. Both are, well, not all of our other one is in Japan, but this one's in Japan. There's same actors, so we kind of got an interesting double feature for you guys this week.
It lined up really well, and we didn't intend for it to do that.
Yeah, but I guess getting into You Only Live Twice. You Only Live Twice it's simple. It's a really simple Bond movie. I don't know if it's because I watched it right after Casino Royale, but this is just easy espionage. There's an evil dude. He's stealing spaceships, and Bond has to go to Japan and find him. It's as simple as it gets.
I mean, it's pretty much almost the same plot as From Russia with Love, almost. Mm-hmm. I mean, because it's in From Russia with Love, it was pitting the USSR versus the UK and making it seem like it was the two of them against each other, but really it was Spectre kind of like orchestrating this whole thing. And it's the exact same thing, except instead of the UK, it's the USA.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no. So they kind of took what was right in that one and mixed it with and took it into this movie. And who wrote this one? The William Wonka, well, I guess I should say the name of the book. The Charlie and the Chocolate Factory writer, Roald Dahl, wrote this, and I guess he hated the book. So this script is completely different from the book. So I guess he was like, I like From Russia with Love. Let's do it again.
Yeah, I forget why, but they were just like, I think Roald Dahl was it was because Roald Dahl was a friend of Ian Fleming.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So both of them bebeing authors. So by this point, Ian Fleming had died. So they're like, oh, well, who would be good? They're like, oh, well, Roald Dahl. He's a writer. He'd be good for this. But Roald Dahl had never written a screenplay before this movie, and but you know what? It's a good screenplay. I always got the impression he was not a fan of the James Bond character, because there was interviews with him where he was just like, oh, I guess we gotta put a woman in there, and like he has to like lust after her, because he wasn't a big fan of that stuff. And he apparently he went to the studio and was like, I guess you guys want me to put a woman as his love interest. And they're like, actually, can we have 3?
That's funny. Wow, he was really against having a love interest for this movie. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, they ended up having the 3 main females in this one.
Okay, yeah, which there's a lot of women in this movie. James Bond, once again, sleazy dude. He sleeps around, he gets the woman kind of deal. I won't say it's as bad as the last Sean Connery Bond where he like forces himself onto that nurse, but it's still not a good look.
Threatens to get her fired if he
Yeah, he's not pulling anything quite like that. I do think at one point he does kiss a woman without her asking, but of course she ends up liking it. So, because it's Sean Connery Bond.
Mm-hmm. I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah, but going back to, I guess you're right, Ryan. But going back to Roald Dahl, I guess this is the only script he ever wrote, or the only like screen adaptation that he wrote that he actually liked. This is what he considered the only one that he liked. So, which is interesting.
Did he write any other screenplays?
I don't know, because from what I read, it said that, but maybe he meant like just anything that got brought to screen that was like his creation.
It's like, oh well, the one movie that I wrote the screenplay for. Yeah, I like this screen adaptation because
that one's good.
Well, I don't know. I kind of take that comment with a grain of salt, just because he really was not a big fan of like almost any of his screen adaptations that were on there. So he was a pretty hard guy to please, I think.
Yeah.
So,
and it's hard to look at his writing credits because they put him as a writer for any like Fantastic Mr. Fox, Matilda, just because he wrote the book.
So I am looking to the other screenplays that he wrote. He wrote the screenplay to Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And this other movie called The Night Digger.
The Night Digger. Never heard of that one. So he's not a Chitty Chitty Bang Bang fan, huh?
I guess not.
All right.
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, we do not love you.
Yeah, that's what he was singing every night until his death.
Damn you, Gene Wilder.
Yeah, I could imagine it. Just a lot of hate letters to Gene Wilder. So the director, I didn't say. Oh, go ahead.
No, he was just mad that Willy Wonka was just not like actually murdering these children like in the book.
He was mad that Willy Wonka was actually likable. But we did talk about the director yet, Lewis Gilbert, who he went on to make other James Bond movies, The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, and it makes sense with Moonraker because they both have space themes to it. Same with this one. This one has a few space scenes.
Right, and the space scenes were not in the original book either. That was added later. But I'm actually glad you brought up the director because before this one, he had made some other movies, but like his big breakthrough directorial movie before this was actually the movie Alfie.
Yep, Alfie, yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen that, but I really like the 60s version of Alfie.
What, you got a problem with Jude Law? No,
I haven't seen it, so I can't comment. So
no,
I'm not.
After watching this one, Alfie actually moved very close to the top of like my need to watch next list because I was like, that's a really important movie. It won Cannes, one of their big awards, and I was like, oh, you know what? I need to watch that. Yeah,
huge success and a big. I mean, that's the movie that got Michael Caine to be a star. So, but they saw that movie and he had just been coming off that, like, and Alfie was like still in theaters when they actually started shooting this movie. Yeah, they're just like, we gotta lock this guy down.
We gotta make sure that he's a success. And I mean, like, he would go on to make plenty of movies after that. It looks like, including,
he made a lot of great movies. I mean, even besides James Bond ones.
Yeah. So no, that's awesome. And I mean, I think this guy, he kind of captures the line between the sillier Bonds. Well, you know what? Now that I'm saying this movie's pretty dang silly. It's like a very silly Bond. I had a lot of fun with this one. I actually have heard that this is like the black sheep of the Sean Connery ones. There's a lot of people that don't like it, and I get it, but I think this one's got a good amount of laughs to it. And it's also shorter compared to a lot of Bonds. I was really surprised about that. Like only around an hour 50 long.
I mean, when you were starting to say that that this wasn't a very comical one, I was like, really? Like,
no, I was saying,
funny.
I was saying that, and I was like, no, I'm wrong. That this movie made me laugh so much.
Because I mean, behind the scenes of this movie, Sean Connery was he really wasn't feeling like the Bond character. He was really getting extreme burnout from being Bond. But I don't know. I really liked this one a lot. I mean, I remember watching this one when I was a kid, and even back then, I think for a while this one was like my favorite at one point.
Nice, yeah.
And because I liked it that much, because see what you said, it was simple. Because when I was trying to watch these movies when I was like a kid, or like 10, 11, 12, like some of the more intricate plot lines and like real world consequences would go over my head a lot of times.
Yeah.
This one, I can understand that it's an evil guy stealing spaceships and they got to take them down.
Exactly. No, that's actually what I liked about it too. I liked its simplicity, and I didn't have to think about all these things going on in the background, and you just know what you need. There's bad guys, and you know what, it's silly at the same time too. And there's just something about this opening sequence that I love. It's an opening sequence that mostly doesn't feature Bond. It's more of a setup for the actual the evil plot of the movie. There are people in space. It's the US in the very beginning, correct? That are in space. Yeah, it's the Americans. And then a giant space bullet, that's what it looks like to me, shows up. Its jaws open up and it eats the spaceship almost. It is the weirdest mechanical thing I have seen.
Well, can you imagine? I'm just imagine like real world. Like imagine if that happened today. Like because there are a lot of shuttle launches now. Can you imagine if it just went off and then you just see like something in the sky just snatch it out of the air and then it's gone forever? People would be freaking out.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine. Like if I knew that there was some unknown country eating a space, well, even if you didn't even know if it was a country, you'd be like, there's an alien and they just captured humans. That would be
that's what I was like. They wouldn't even assume it was a different country because that's in the movie. That's how they they play both sides. Is the U.S. think it's Russia that's doing this?
Yeah,
and that they start threatening that they're going to launch nuclear weapons against them, that sort of thing. But I was just thinking, like in real life, if that happened, you would think like, oh my God, aliens.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what you would think. But no, that I like that part of this movie, thinking about its context, because they instantly blame Russia and the Russians instantly blame America because we're deep in Cold War times right then, and the space race was going on. I don't know, I thought that was like, oh yeah, the space race, they were fighting to be first on the moon at this time, so this is just a huge topic for the time, and I think it's cool how it reflects here.
It's really reflective of the time, as you said. I really like a lot of the backgrounds for this movie. I love the setting. This movie is extremely Japanese, and I guess you couldn't tell by a lot of my favorites and movies that I pick.
Yeah,
I like a lot of Japanese cinema, so this type of stuff really appeals to me.
Yeah, I actually really love that this one, kind of like Dr. No, is set in one place. So you really get to settle into that area, right? Like you get to settle into Japan, you see the locations, and you see a few landmarks in the background too. So you really get into it. And I like that. And of course, I like globetrotting, but there is something nice about this is the Japanese James Bond. and he might become the Japanese James Bond later. Who knows?
Oh, yeah. We got to talk about that too, don't we?
Yeah, yes, we do. We'll get there eventually. But no, I think the opening when James Bond shows up is really funny too. That he, it's all a setup. They fake his death, and I think that is very apparent from the beginning. There's no way. I'm sure there was a few people out there, but there's no way you could make me think that James Bond is going to die in the beginning of the James Bond movie, especially Sean Connery Bond.
Well, yeah, they're all well. So I've watched the documentary that was associated with this, and that was one of the things. Like, oh, we wanted to do something different and have James Bond die, and I'm like, well, you did that already in From Russia with Love.
That's right. So, they're just repeating From Russia with Love.
So I'm like, it's not, and I'm like, is anyone really going to think that, oh no, James Bond's dead in the first 2 minutes of the movie? I can't believe it.
Yeah, exactly. No one's gonna think that. They could have been banking that people were saying that it was Sean Connery's last James Bond, but they would never. But I do love that the police show up and they think he died. It almost looks like he died by fold up bed. Like they take the what do you call those kind of beds? The Murphy bed, and they take it down, and it looks like he died just from it like closing on him. And they're like, oh, he died just the way he lived, or just the way he worked, or something like that. Like, oh, he died doing what he loved, sleeping with a woman.
Yeah. Did you like the exchange that he had with this woman? Because it was another Asian woman, but she was Chinese instead of a Japanese woman. And they interviewed the woman. Right. They interviewed that woman, and they're like, oh, they told me to get in bed with Sean Connery. And of course I wouldn't mind. Who wouldn't? And it's this weird exchange where she's like, oh, do you like Asian women? He's like, do you like them better than other women? He's like, no, not better. They're just different.
Yeah, and no, I think he says Chinese women taste different.
Yeah, well, it's like if I wanted, I forget what he said, something. He's like, but then one day I want Peking duck.
Yeah.
And then she gets out of bed and she's like, oh, well, I hope to give you a very good duck.
Yeah. Good Lord. Horrible. This movie has some really good lines in it, just like that one.
I know, it's almost as good as Everlasting Gobstopper and Snozzberries.
You know what? Yeah, it's right up there. If we did Roald Dolls, it's as good as Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, I would say. Man.
Yeah, I really like that line, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Yeah, me too. But imagine, the guy who wrote all these children book classics is writing some of
like sexual innuendo.
Yeah, some nasty stuff. I guess to talk over it briefly, we do have an opening title sequence with a song done by Nancy Sinatra, and it's the name of the movie, You Only Live Twice. And I guess I hadn't listened to the song in a long time. I forgot how good this song is. I love this song. It's one of the better ones.
I do like the song. Mm-hmm. I will say the animatics are not my favorite.
Yeah, those are a little boring. It's just usually a lot of women's eyes and faces over like volcanoes and kind of like settings around Japan.
Well, yeah, and then the credits are like in the form of one of the like traditional umbrellas, like Asian umbrellas that they use. Or a parasol, whatever you want to call it. But no, the song is great though. I mean, it's up there in terms of like the other movies that we've talked about.
Yeah, no, totally.
But is it as good as Three Blind Mice?
Nothing beats Three Blind Mice. I think that's just a great song in general. It's stood the test of time, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But
and also too, Nancy Sinatra is the first non-British singer.
Oh, nice. That's cool. And they got her after her dad said no. After Frank Sinatra said no. So she was an afterthought, like, I guess we'll get Nancy.
Or either that or Frank Sinatra paid off the mob or whatever, like whatever he did to get that role From Here to Eternity.
Oh, is that what did he do that?
Oh, you never heard that rumor?
I never know.
Like that's that's famously how like he was like desperately wanted that role in From Here to Eternity, and there's always these rumors that Frank Sinatra had all these connections to the mob, and that supposedly that's how he got the role. Is like the mob did the like put the squeeze on the producer. Like that's like the scene in The Godfather. That's what that scene is parroting with the horse.
No
head.
way. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was kind of referencing like a real life thing that happened. Well,
Allegedly,
alleged.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
actually really interesting. I like that a lot. And Frank Sinatra's really great in that role, to be honest. So the mob did the right thing there.
I think the mob should cast more movies.
I think so too. Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right?
Yeah.
Well, they just produced it.
I know. Just think we could have had James Gandolfini in almost every movie.
Yeah. Well, he got some weird parts. I don't know. Like that movie with the romantic comedy movie.
Enough Said.
Enough Said. I almost said Say Anything. Different movie.
Well, he could have been in that one too. Like, can you imagine a young James Gandolfini holding a stereo?
I would watch it. I like that idea. But no, getting back to the movie, I think that, it goes through the whole thing. Oh, Sean Connery's not dead. Oh my God. They toss his body overboard, all that mess. But go ahead.
Oh, so I was going to say, so I did kind of make the joke that like, how could they expect that? But apparently they did say that in the press tour that
really
James Bond dies in this movie and it kind of coincides with Sean Connery making his announcement, which we're going to get to later. But they were like, oh yeah, James Bond is going to die. So I guess maybe they thought they were going to kill him off and maybe introduce a new Bond, maybe like mid-movie. I guess that could be the case. But I mean, still though, the posters for this movie, it's Sean Connery's name. I don't know if you looked at any of the posters, but Sean Connery's names are just like, it's plastered. It literally says Sean Connery is James Bond, and it's
there's no denying it, right? Like I don't know, and like this predates before the idea that James Bond was going to be played by multiple different people, right? Like it would have been like, oh, he died, and then that's the end of James Bond movies.
Yeah, they obviously they wanted him to keep going. They really wanted him to keep going. Well, I guess since we're talking about, we might as well mention it. But like we said, like midway through the filming of this movie, Sean Connery made kind of like an earth-shattering announcement that I'm not coming back to do another Bond.
Yeah,
and apparently they tried to pay him like a ton of money, but they never could reach an agreement. So because they had to film this movie very fast because he had like a certain timeline on his contract. So this was the last movie, then he fulfilled his contract.
Yeah. And when he was done, I guess it's just a lot for him. I'm not too sure his reasons, but I mean, whatever they were, I'm sure it was taxing. A lot of workout, a lot of stunts. I mean, he wasn't doing all the stunts, but still, there was a lot to this role.
So they get into that a lot about why Sean Connery had this burnout is because that this became like, we've talked about Bond fever and how people were obsessed with James Bond before all this. And at the same time, like people that this started to affect Sean Connery as well, because people would go all the time and start hounding him and asking James Bond questions. Like even during the filming of this movie, he arrived in Japan off of the plane and he just got swarmed like the Beatles, where they're just like ripping at his clothes and things like that. And just people are just like hounding him all the time for interviews. Like the guy couldn't go anywhere without people being like, oh my God, it's James Bond. And he was just like so done with the character, I think, and he was just getting extreme burnout and probably wanted to do other things.
And it seemed like, I don't know, people thought he was James Bond outside of the role kind of deal, because I did read about an interview where like he said like somebody saw him dressed like kind of like comfortably, and they were like, oh, James Bond wouldn't dress that way, and he's like, well, I like being comfortable, I'm Sean Connery, like it was, that I'm sure that gets annoying.
Well, yeah, that's the part I was going to reference. So they Sean Connery wears a toupee. We've never have said that, but
Yeah.
he's not. He fully admits it too. But he wears a toupee to have his hair look a lot thicker because his hair is very thin. He's got not much hair on the top of his head, but he like appeared on. I don't know if he was just like out walking and he got hit up by a reporter.
That's what it sounded like.
But yeah, it was a Japanese reporter went up to him, and apparently he had like a baggy shirt on with loose fitting pants and sandals, no toupee. And they're just like, oh my God, like, is this how James Bond? He said, no, but this is how Sean Connery dress.
Yeah, exactly. And at least he was honest. So I like that.
But I could see it. I mean, at this point, he's been doing it for 5 years. So I could see it just like, all right, I don't want to be typecast as this sort of thing. So let me just move on.
Yeah, I want to seek other acting roles. You know, I don't want to play the same character. So no, I get that. But you know, he still puts in a really great job in this movie. I don't think you can, because it seemed like there's problems on set. He didn't really like the producers of this movie and stuff like that. But Sean Connery's still, to me, very charming in this role, and he's still really funny. And I think he's still putting in a good performance.
I think he's good in this one. It's not my favorite of his performances. I think he is trying it. I do think he is putting an effort, but I don't feel like his heart and soul is into it as much as the other ones were.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, I still got it. Like you said, though, I don't think it's his best, of course. I think that might just be the movie's writing, in a way. I mean, to me, the best Sean Connery role and the best James Bond, at least so far, is Goldfinger. Bar none, is just the best.
So Goldfinger still tops it for you.
Yes, yeah, it does.
Okay, I believe it still does for me too, but this one's up there in terms of the sequels. So I
was surprised by that.
So well, I guess we'll get into it later, but I right now I think it's currently my second favorite.
Wow, that really moved up. I don't think it's second, but it's better than some of the other entries. I'd have to think about it. I would have to make a nice ranking list, which I do want to do. There is one more technically Eon Sean Connery movie, and I do want to rank all of Sean Connery's movies after that one. So I think
so we should do that then. Just do it based off of, we should do our rankings for each Bond.
That's what I was thinking. And then maybe whenever we finish this way down the line, then we can do a giant list or something, but that's way later.
I can't wait to rank George Lazenby's movies.
Yeah, we don't get to do it more. Timothy Dalton's, just one's better than the other.
Yeah, at least that's something.
That's true. George Lazenby is just like, ow.
Well, I think this one's his best and worst performance, but anyway.
You can say that. Yeah, but anyway, I guess moving on, I think this movie starts out strong with its silliness. This is one of the few Bonds that doesn't take place in the UK, or it doesn't have anything in the UK, I should say, because the headquarters, James Bond's headquarters, is on a ship, and I love that everybody has their little outfits. Money.
I know.
I don't know. It's just kind of fun. It's like something a little different.
Well, yeah, because we didn't say, but yeah, when it's revealed that they faked his death to kill him off, they take him out of a body bag, which they pulled out of the bottom of the ocean, and he just has his outfit on, just ready to go, his naval commander outfit. Yeah,
and I think as soon as they take off his like body bag or whatever, he's like, request to come on ship.
Yeah, request to come aboard.
Yeah, so it's just like he always has a quip no matter when it is. But yeah, no, James Bond is put right on the mission to go to Japan and kind of figure out where this base is that is stealing the spaceships with the giant space bullet. And and I really love the characters in this one. Once you actually get to Japan, you meet some really cool characters. You get to meet Aki, who is the Japanese woman there, and like kind of the side operative to all of this. She's go ahead.
Well, what I like about her character is that you don't really know which side she's on in the beginning.
Yeah, I like that too. I think it's like kind of playful in a way. Like you don't know, and like he takes her, sorry, she takes him to like the secret base. You still don't know what's going on. There's a lot of sliding in this movie. It's a weird motif, but I really like that the floor drops out from Sean Connery and he slides down. He just lands right in the chair, and you still don't know what's going on.
Well, so the way that James Bond has, because M and Moneypenny tell him, oh, you're gonna have to go meet some operatives out in Japan, and don't forget the code word. And Moneypenny tells him the code word, and it's "I love you."
Yes,
and she's looking right at him. She's like, "Oh, can you repeat that to me?" He's like, "I got it."
Yeah, Moneypenny, you're not getting that.
Yeah, and they mentioned, but he has. So now, anytime he meets somebody that he thinks may be on the side, he just has to say, "I love you," and he always says it so awkwardly because James Bond he doesn't fall in love with women. He just, so that I think even for him, even though he doesn't, there's no romantic context, right? Like just for him to say "I love you" is like pains him almost.
And he has to say it to a man in this movie. He has to say it to Tanaka Tiger. Great name, by the way. Who is the Secret Service like of Japan's like leader, and he's like, "I love you," or what? I think he says, "What is your fondness of me?"
He's like, how do you feel about me? And he's just like, "I love you."
Yeah. Speaking, I think this is the first. We talked about how dubbing in these movies is usually really good. This is the first time where I feel like the dubbing is subpar.
It's very noticeable. Yeah, it's very because. So I noticed it because the guy that voices Tiger, he speaks like perfectly clear English, like not even a hint of an accent. But then when he takes James Bond to a bathhouse, like where all these women are bathing him and stuff, and there's one, because he is dubbed throughout this whole movie, but there is like one part where he actually speaks like in Japanese, and it's like totally different. Doesn't sound anything alike his Japanese voice versus his dub voice.
It's so bad and so noticeable. Like, I don't know why they even made that choice to do that. Like, because every other movie with they dubbed the people and they weren't changing their language, but this time it just felt maybe a little lazy. I don't know.
But I think what I remember reading is that this is, I think, the last movie to use extensive dubbing like that, where they just hire foreign actors and then just give them a totally different voice.
Probably for the better. Dubbing does not seem like an easy process, and most of the time it's pretty noticeable.
It is.
But this scene with the Secret Service agent, it was so. We talked about Austin Powers multiple times, but I think this movie is like a direct inspiration to that first Austin Powers movie. It like is so like, wow. Well, not even the first one, the other ones too.
Well, yeah, because the whole second half of the movie is in a volcano, and then that's what the second Austin Powers is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know what? You're right. And then the scene where of course the Japanese guy's like, "Oh, we're time to take a bath together, and we got women here," and he says the line, "Men come first, women come second," which is in Austin Powers.
It is. And then there's the scene where Blofeld has these piranhas like in a pool.
Yeah.
And like they eat meat, and like anytime anyone falls in there, they just die instantly.
Yeah. So I mean, like, this was definitely the one when they were making those movies that, like, I feel like because it is kind of James Bond turned up, like all of the cliches, the silliness turned up, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think that's part of the charm of this one. But yeah, I think it's around here where they have a conversation about where the ship comes from. But I just love how Sean Connery's trying to show off that he loves Japanese culture. And he's like, "I love sake," like the way he says sake.
Well, yeah. So they, before Moneypenny gets there, but she's like, "Oh, like, you better brush up on your Japanese." And he's like, "Oh, you forget, I took a class in Cambridge." But then he goes there, and you're supposed to say sake. But he says Saki.
That's what it is. Yeah. Obviously, he loves Japan, and he took those middle school Japanese classes at Cambridge Middle School. Really came in handy for his future.
He didn't say he passed those classes.
That is true, and I don't think he did.
There was another line too, where they actually reference the relationship between James Bond and Moneypenny at the bathhouse, because Tanaka Tiger actually mentions, it's like, we know you've loved many women, including Miss Moneypenny, and he kind of just gives him a look, and he's like, I have my sources too, Mr. Bond.
Yeah, I thought that was funny.
Well, so it just because they never have said directly that they were involved before. So I was like, I think that's the first time they actually mentioned that they were with each other.
Yeah, it's always been playful before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dang. So they just let the cat out of the bag, or whoever was watching. How openly were they doing their relations?
I don't know, but I mean, damn, you just stand in the same room as them. It's
yeah. Oh, I know you have an experience with that woman. Yeah, I just talked to her on the ship.
Well, could you if you were just in the same room as them and they were talking like that, you're just should I leave or?
Yeah, true. Yeah, huh? They're talking about me. But I was gonna say one thing that I think really stands out about this movie, and I think it's actually really good, is the cinematography, because it's a lot of aerial stuff, and it's made by, I had to look it up, Freddie Young, who did the cinematography for Lawrence of Arabia, which I think is one of the best looking movies ever made. And here, I think all the stuff on helicopters is really cool. The first moment of that was whenever he's getting chased at the docks by that huge group of Japanese people, and it's aerial, zoomed out shots of him running and flipping off of buildings. It was the first time anything like that's been done in one of these movies. I thought it was a really cool action set piece.
Oh yeah, the aerial shots in this movie are insane. There's a helicopter fight scene, and it's just insane, how they shot that movie, and quite literally, crazy things happened on that set when they were doing that.
Oh yeah, didn't someone lose a leg? That's what happened. Yeah,
the guy named Johnny Jordan, he was an aerial photographer, and they had him for the movie, and his leg got caught in the propeller for a helicopter, and they were able to reattach his leg, but it didn't take, so they had to chop his leg off again.
That sucks. That's really sad.
But he was not too long after, he was back shooting aerial shots up until the day he died. So
so it didn't let him stop his career. So that's good. But no, I mean, though that helicopter, it's a little bit ahead, but we can hop into that. James Bond gets a little helicopter. It's almost like a toy helicopter called
gyrocopter.
But he has a name for it. Little Nelly, little Nelly. And one of the weirdest lines in the movie is, of course, Q shows up to give him his gyrocopter, and Sean Connery says, "Is my little girl hot and ready?" And that line out of context sounds so gross, but he's talking about his gyrocopter, little Nelly. And another cool editing trick is when they're building it and all the pieces slowly pop onto it as they build it.
Yeah, that ship was actually owned by the actual pilot of it, and he was the one doing all the flying on the gyrocopter, but he actually invented it and he flew it and everything. But I think he said altogether he flew like 40 hours or something like that in the air. They were getting shots for it. And he's like, oh yeah, they shot hours and hours of footage, and about 5 minutes of it was on screen, or 10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, it's cool what you do get to see, because it's one of the biggest things I've seen. This James Bond costs way more than any of the other ones, and you can tell with just the helicopters, and there's missiles being shot and they're fighting back and forth, and it lasts 5 to 10 minutes, and it's a really cool looking scene.
Well, yeah, that's the main gadget of the movie. There's one other gadget later, but but that's pretty much the big one in this movie. In fact, that's the only vehicle that James Bond operates, because this is one of the only James Bond where James Bond doesn't drive a car.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, somebody else drives a car. Aki drives.
He rides in a car.
Yeah, he rides in it, but yeah, he doesn't drive a car, but he does fly. So I think that's a fine trade-off.
Yeah, he said, drive my car to Aki in Japan.
Yeah. Oh, what is this? Did Drive My Car rip off of this movie?
Yeah,
that's what I'm getting out of this. But no. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just, since you brought up Aki, I was going to say, what did you think of her as a character?
I liked her. She was fun. I think I had more fun at the end of the movie with I hate her name, Kissy, but but Aki is getting into Kissy. Well, no, let's not get into Kissy yet. But no, Aki, I like Aki. How did you feel about her?
Yeah, I liked her because she was actually really competent, and at first she was trying to turn down both of them tried to turn down his advances, but James Bond, he never takes no for an answer. So
no. Well, Andy sleeps with another woman in this movie too.
Oh yeah, but she's a bad girl, so she deserves whatever was coming to her.
Yeah, I mean, he even says, "What I do for my country," like it's the worst thing in the world to happen to him.
I did have like a serious quandary. I'm like, does James Bond like actually enjoy like sex, or is this literally just a tool for him?
I think that's a really good question to have. That like he probably really doesn't care, like at that, like if he's making statements like that, it's just like, all right, it is what it is. It's just a tool to use so I can get my way.
Well, I mean, there's certain times though, like when he sleeps with that woman in Thunderball, when it's like, well, he didn't have to sleep to have to, because it's not like he got any special entry anywhere.
Well, then you could say something really gross about his personality and be like, oh yeah, he likes it when he's an awful person, I guess. But
he likes it when he's totally in control.
Yeah, but I'm sure the writers were not thinking about this stuff.
Well, I just was wondering, because I remember, this is getting way, way ahead, but there's other James Bond movies that I remember where there was, it's a big spoiler, but there's like a hint of like homosexuality at one point, where they like one evil boss like kind of flirts with them, and they're like, oh, have you ever done this before? And he's like, what makes you think I haven't? But no, that's just something I was like kind of wondering. I'm like, is he just doing this just to like ensnare these women, to like control them in some sort of way? Like, is this really a tool, or is he just like a total sex crazed fiend?
because I mean, the amount of sleeping around he does it's quite a lot. And I mean, even with the bad girl there, he kind of gets screwed over in that one, because she flies him in a plane and she locks him in with a wooden plank and jumps out of the plane.
That was dumb. That part was dumb.
That was straight dumb. She drives out and like it's just a wooden piece of wood
board,
holding his hands, and he just breaks it.
Like, imagine if you're sitting in a chair and then somebody holds like you have like your arms laying on your lap, and then somebody puts a plank of wood and they're just holding it down on you. That's about what it's like.
Yeah, and he easily gets out of it, but of course the plane explodes, so she's like, oh, okay, James Bond is gone. Or this guy, she doesn't realize it's James Bond until even later in the movie, because everybody thinks James Bond is dead. So
well, yeah, he poses as a salesman, or like a sales guy, I think, or he works for like a different company, I believe.
But that's kind of his in.
But all right, so we mentioned the other two women, so now we got to mention so Aki. So we haven't gotten to this part, but yeah, like he there's so they finally figure out where the secret layer is, and they're like, okay, well, in order to prepare, you have to train as a ninja, and then you have to become Japanese. Like, quite literally, they want him to look like a Japanese man. And so James Bond goes full yellow face in this movie.
Yeah, this is the most dated aspect of this movie, is that James Bond goes yellow face, and it's painful.
Not as bad as Breakfast at Tiffany's, like with
God,
Mickey
no.
Rooney, but
No.
it's very unfortunate that it's in this movie, because
Yeah.
that's a belt and that's a black mark so far. But
Yeah, because there's that one scene where they're like painting him, and it's the women on top of him, and they pull down his pants, and he's like, "Oh, does it have to be my whole body?" And it's like, "Oh God!" So they gave him the
yeah,
full body thing. Yeah, and I mean, he's got it's rough. It's rough, but this part of the movie does have its funny moments. I do love that there's ninjas in James Bond that rocks.
mm-hmm.
There do have swords and everything. I guess a fun fact about this movie is that all the producers, when they were touring Japan, um, their flight back was supposed to crash. Well, it would end up crashing. Of course, they didn't know that. Everybody would die on board, but they canceled to go to a ninja demonstration so they could use that for the movie. So they had like a Mark Wahlberg, Seth MacFarlane moment where they were almost dead from a plane crash.
Yeah, that was one thing I remember. They talked about that in the documentary, that they, like, pretty much like the most influential people to behind the scenes on James Bond would have just died right there with.
Yeah. And who knows where we would be at with these movies if they would have actually died there.
I know. Well, who knows?
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, I guess going back to him becoming Japanese, the moment I do love is they say that he has to get married. And it's Sean Connery doing the most wild reaction. So he's
so Aki. Well, you got to mention Aki does get murdered.
Oh yes,
because Aki was going to be originally his spouse, but the Spectre agent like drops poison into her mouth from the ceiling.
Yeah, well, drops it. He was going to drop it in Sean Connery's mouth, but then Sean Connery just kind of moves in his sleep, and then the poison dips into her mouth.
Yeah. So yeah, but anyway, go ahead. I'll let you explain the next scene.
Oh yeah, no. So yeah, he has to get married to a woman, and there's women that walk up that could be his bride, and they're all just older women, right? But every time he sees these older women, he gives this look of disgust, like, oh, don't tell me that's my wife.
Well, because beforehand they mentioned, they're like, oh, we'll set you up with the wife. And he said, yeah, I bet they're all it's something like they're all pig-faced or something like that. And I'm just like, oh my God. And just but yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with these women, but it's just like they're not like in their early 20s or whatever. Like James Bond's used to going after. So
no, and I hate like thinking of movies like this where literally they're hiring and just like, oh yeah, we need an ugly woman, we need an ugly person for this part. So, and that's what they're getting treated like in the movie. But then a beautiful young woman shows up, and that's who he ends up marrying. And he's a nice like, smile.
Yeah, he's like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, like a sigh of relief. But I do like that he has a traditional Japanese wedding because he's really getting into it. But James Bond is a little pushy whenever they are married and living together, because she's like, this is business. We're not sleeping in the same bed with each other. He's like, why not? He's like, well, shouldn't we be doing the whole thing? This is our honeymoon, baby, kind of deal.
Yeah, like he just like is supposed to get access to her body just because they're fake married or what. So it's at the time I'm sure it's funny, but now it kind of plays real poor. But but that's the woman he meets. Her name is Kissy.
Yep, Kissy. Yep.
Played by Mai Hama.
Yep, Mai Hama.
And who we will mention later this week. But anyway, there's a story behind this. So when they were casting for these two roles, they really wanted Japanese women for this movie, and they screen tested hundreds of different women, and almost none of them could speak English. Like almost all of them didn't speak English. And
gotcha.
So they had to have somewhat of an English dialect, so that way it would match the dubbing. So they had to have some understanding. So they hired two Japanese women to live in the UK for several months and like ingrain themselves into the society so that way they learn English. And the girl that plays Aki apparently picked it up really well, and they're like, okay, she did a really great job. But the girl that played Kissy, Mai Hama, she was having a real hard time, and Lewis Gilbert had said, like, she was working really hard, but we were running behind schedule, so I didn't think we should, I didn't think it was going to work out. So he talked to the guy that played Tanaka Tiger, and he's like, can you just let her down gently that we're probably going to have to recast this role? And because originally the two girls were playing the opposite roles, like, so Mai Hama was playing Aki, and the other girl was playing Kissy.
Okay.
And so he said, okay, I'll go tell her. And then he said the next day, he's like, well, how did it go? Oh, she told me that tonight she's going to jump off the balcony of her hotel and kill herself.
Oh my God.
So then he's like, I think we can make this role work.
Yeah, I'd probably do the same. I'd be like, all right, that's her role.
So they switched them because the role for Kissy didn't require too much dialogue as the one that Aki did.
And I could see that, and that makes sense. It's probably a smart switching of roles. But yeah, I mean, she's fine as Kissy. Kissy is just a really interesting character because I do think she's more, the movie makers make her more of a use as eye candy, because towards the end she's in a lot of bikini, or she is in a bikini for most of the end of the movie, and it's a little unnecessary.
I liked Aki better because Aki had a little more of a personality, and like there's like a really funny moment earlier with her and Bond where Bond's getting a massage at the bathhouse, and then she kind of sneaks in and starts massaging him, and he looks real happy to see her, and it's kind of like this nice moment, and but she actually seemed like she actually wanted to be with Bond, and Kissy was just like worn down by his advances.
Yeah, until she finally just had to. But the end of this movie is really neat. So they finally find Blofeld's base. So it is Blofeld, a returning villain from other movies. But
Blofeld.
Sorry, Garfield. Yeah, Blofeld is the returning villain from other movies, and but a different actor playing him, and it's actually a returning actor to the show, Donald Pleasance playing a villain. Who would have thought?
Such an iconic.
It is
presence. It just he looks so good in this movie. Like, it's insane.
There's a reason this is Dr. Evil. This is the stereotypical James Bond villain, because he just does it so well. He's got the scar on the face. He's wearing the gray. He's got the cat. He's just perfect. And Donald Pleasance is just a really good actor. So like, he just brings that presence so well to this movie.
So do you know that originally Donald Pleasance wasn't the first Blofeld actor for this movie?
Yeah, I do know that. I know they did screen tests with another actor, but I'm not too sure who. No,
they shot I think they said they like 10 days worth of shooting with this one actor, and I forget the name of it, but Lewis Gilbert, they showed pictures of him. It's like he looked like a sweet old man with he looked like Santa Claus.
That's funny.
So like you see this character, the actor, he looks like Santa Claus. He's got like a big bushy white beard with like gray hair, and he's got like a little, he's bigger, so it doesn't look like Blofeld at all. So just imagine if that was what we got for this movie instead of that with Donald Pleasance.
Yeah, right. It would probably come out a lot goofier because, my God, Donald Pleasance, he's goofy, but he still plays evil really well. Where that would be like, I'm playing goofy and I look goofy. It wouldn't work as well. The way he handles his cat, though, did you notice in one of these scenes, the cat is trying its hardest to escape out of his arms, and he's like holding on to it for dear life.
This cat is making such an expression. I thought it was a fake cat at one
Really?
point.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then after I watched that scene again, I'm like, I think that's a real cat.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's handling her. Well, I read trivia that that cat peed and pooped on Donald Pleasance multiple times during the movie.
Yeah, he was freaking out.
They definitely, he went the extra mile because he was acting so straight that whole time, and this cat is like like I know he was probably getting scratched up or something.
Well, you notice at the end of the movie, he totally just does not care a thing about that cat and runs for his life.
Yeah, exactly. I do. I love that. I also love the base here. This base looks great in the volcano, where the top opens up, and that's how helicopters and rockets shoot out of it. And this set, I was reading, cost as much as Doctor No cost to make, which is insane.
It was a $4 million set that Ken Adams made, and that was his biggest undertaking yet. And it is one of the most impressive sets to a movie.
It is. I love it. Anything with like a roller coaster type thing, ride, because it's not a ride, it's transportation, but it's just neat with the vehicle they all ride in, and it rides on the rail like a monorail down, and that's how everybody just moves around there. I thought that was just neat, and that somebody built that. I couldn't imagine getting $4 million to be like, yeah, just make an evil base, and then just getting the run with it.
Yeah, it's crazy. They have like this huge intricate track. I mean, the set is huge. It's humongous. I mean, like the ceiling for this set, it's about the size of a volcano. I mean, it's just So I mean, they spent $4 million to basically just make it the inside of a volcano.
And I guess that's what's cool is there are blue screen moments, but I think like the helicopter scene, this volcano could have easily done blue screen, but they did the real thing, and you really can tell when it's the real thing, and it looks cool.
Well, since you mentioned it, that's one of my biggest gripes of the movie is the green screen in this movie looks bad.
Oh yeah, any of the car scenes, it is rough. Or oh god,
the boat scene at the end.
Yeah, the boat scene. I watched that and I was like, wow, they let this, even in the 1960s, they let this get released. It was bad. Or
not as bad as Deliverance was, but still, it was. But it's still just like why could they not just like film this and like throw a raft into some water or whatever and just shoot it or real quick?
No,
could they not borrow Toho's big pool or whatever?
Right, they're probably right nearby. Speaking of Deliverance, though, I will argue that the volcano, because I'll skip to the end. The volcano does go off in the end. That volcano, it might be one of the worst things I've seen.
Now that you say that, I know exactly. Yeah, where like it's a volcano. It's a volcano, and they want to show it erupting, so they just superimpose like lava running off of this completely dormant volcano.
Yeah, it looks like two images just plastered against each other. I don't know why they even tried to put this in the movie.
Yeah, it doesn't look good.
No. But everything else is cool. The final showdown where James Bond gets out of it because he gets to have his cigarette, which is one of the gadgets in the movies. It's a rocket bullet inside a cigarette that he can shoot out of the cigarette. I guess anti-cigarettes was a big talk at this time. I could tell because the whole time James Bond was getting jokes at him for like, oh, those will kill you. Yeah, those cigarettes are going to kill you.
It's like the nicotine won't kill you, Mr. Bond.
Yeah. And you know what? That's how he got out. Wow.
So since we're talking about that, like I did like the cigarette thing. That one was pretty clever, I thought. But there's so many, like the big joke, like, you know, they always make an Austin Powers, which we've mentioned this before, is that there are so many opportunities they could have just killed James Bond and they don't take it at all. Like there's one scene where they have him captured and they just let him stand there. And there's one scene where Blofeld is like running with one of his henchmen and James Bond is still captured and he has a gun and Blofeld's like, all right, this is the end of the line for you. And then Blofeld shoots one of his henchmen, and then he still brings James Bond along. And then when he gets in his tram, he's like, okay, now I'm going to shoot you. I'm like, what?
Yeah, he could have just been like, bam, bam. If he really wanted to shoot the henchman, he could have just shot both of them there. But no, James Bond, you think that he's saving him for like a big kill, but no, it seemed like he was just going to shoot him again. So it wasn't even that big of a deal.
He just walked to the next room and he's like, okay, now I'm going to shoot you when I'm in a seated position in a moving vehicle.
Yeah, and he ends up just, driving away from him. That plot line just kind of goes away. It's so silly. But I really do think, I've said this earlier, but I really do think this one is a major inspiration for Austin Powers.
Oh, it's complete inspiration. I mean, I don't know how you couldn't see it. But it's definitely it sets a standard for spy movies. I mean, there's a lot of other like James Bond knockoffs that would come after this, and I think a lot of them borrow from this one and like Goldfinger maybe. But the sets, it just like everything in here just looks top notch.
No, I agree. I think just overall, this movie is a really good James Bond movie. I think like this would be a good James Bond to introduce to somebody who hasn't seen James Bond before. And I say that because I feel like this has a lot of the tropes, a lot of the fun, silly stuff, and it's simple. And I think it's easy to give to them. I don't think it's the best, but maybe a really accessible James Bond. And I think I really appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, if you're like, if you have like someone that's younger or whatever, I mean, there's still some sex in there, but it's like, but if they're like 12 or 13 or whatever, they probably have seen worse at that point. So you could have them watch that. And like I said, that was a movie. Like this was like one of my favorite James Bonds at one point. So it holds up still. I mean, there's still some dated stuff in there, but for the overall, it's a great experience.
Yep. It's really fun. I think this one's a really good time. I recommend checking it out. I guess. Oh, go ahead.
I had some house cleaning for this one.
Me too.
So go ahead. I'll let you. We'll each take a turn.
Well, I just had one thing to say, and that's just kind of the aftermath of this movie. So this movie did cost $9.5 million to make, and it made $111 million at the box office, which was actually a decline for James Bond, the first kind of financial decline for them. Still a ton of money, so of course they're going to still try to make more. But they credit that to Casino Royale coming out a couple months before that, kind of killing a little bit of it.
That damn movie.
Yeah, that awful movie made this movie lose money. And I think, and it was the second movie of the year, second to The Dirty Dozen. Who knows if it would have been number one without Casino Royale, but I don't know. I guess that's an interesting way to look at it. Still a huge moneymaker, though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the couple of things I wanted to mention. So there's a scene where we didn't mention where James Bond fights a guy that's holding a samurai sword. That guy, he was actually Peter Maivia, and that is Dwayne Johnson, The Rock's grandfather.
That's kind of awesome, actually. Yeah, that's really cool.
So another pro wrestler that's in this movie, along with Oddjob.
Oh, okay, yeah, true. And we got more to come, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. And the other thing too, so another thing that made Sean Connery really, really mad is that behind his back, they made a James Bond knockoff movie starring his younger brother, Neil Connery. Because I sent you the link for this before we recorded, just because it was I couldn't wait to tell you, because I normally I try to save all this stuff for the podcast, but I was just like, I cannot wait to tell you this. So it has Neil Connery is the star as a knockoff character, and it also stars Bernard Lee, Lois Maxwell, Moneypenny. It also has Domino from Russia with Love. It also has the bad guy from Thunderball is the bad guy in this one too.
Yep.
So it's just like all these other ones, and it's called Operation Kid Brother, but there's lots of other names. There's another one where it's called OK Connery and
what?
Yeah.
Oh my god, it's awful because that's Sean Connery's little brother, and did he do this behind his big brother's back? Like, yeah,
I think
don't
so.
tell Sean. That's kind of messed up.
Like he did, like he was like mad about it, and I can completely understand Sean Connery's point, because that totally cheapens the brand, and it's like,
yeah.
I'd be like, why would you guys agree to do something like that? So,
Yeah, all those people were like, yeah, we'll sign up for it, when it's just like a cheap knockoff and not like, even, I don't know, it was money. Even though that production for that, watching the trailer, doesn't look like it was like worth that much, and I'm sure it didn't even make that much money.
no, but they did recover that one on Mystery Science Theater.
Oh, nice. Well, I was thinking it would probably be a really good one to bring up on our show as well.
Well, I mean, that one's technically next in the timeline.
Who knows? I got to work really hard till we can switch other Bonds. I'll do a bunch of knockoffs first.
Yeah, there's lots we could talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And it's just, you watch the trailer to it, and it's just, they're trying to make a James Bond movie. I mean, they really were trying to just be like, yeah, it's same guy. That means it's going to be just as good. And we have all these other Bond actors in here.
Yeah, no, I think that's so messed up. But what are we going to be covering next time?
Well, Nathan, we're going to go back to the Toho well, and I think it's time.
Is it time?
We're going to finally talk about it. We're going to be talking about destroying all your expectations, because we have one more movie to talk about.
Okay.
And it is I mean, I know you're just salivating. You're waiting.
I'm itching. I'm shaking, ready for destroying all monsters.
Well, we got one more monster who makes an appearance, and we're actually going to be talking about one monster we've already talked about already, and we're going to be talking about King Kong Escapes.
King Kong Escapes. Okay.
Yep. Which is not streaming anywhere, unfortunately, but you can watch it over at the Internet Archive.
Cool. I can't wait to watch this, so I can, it's like Sasquatch footage and destroy all humans. Oh, that blur back there, that's him. That's the monster.
No, surprisingly, this one actually has more of a prominent role than the other two that we've talked about.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm excited. If you want to send us an email, you can email us over at driveindoublefeaturepodcast@gmail.com. And you can also tweet at us or check us out on Twitter at DIDFpod. But until next time,